Hey everybody! So I know it's been a little while, but the other day I finally got around to seeing Ralph Breaks the Internet. So I thought I would come on here and give you guys my thoughts on this Disney sequel. So yeah, it did take me a little while to see this one. That was for a couple reasons. First off, for the same reason that you guys haven't seen a Disney guy review lately. I've been crazy busy at work. If you follow me on Twitter, I kind of outline some of the issues that I've been having there just with how much I've been at work. So if I look a little bit tired, I'm sorry, but that's why. So I haven't had a ton of time to go to the movies, so that's why I've been a little bit delayed. Also, I didn't have quite the same motivation to go see this movie compared to other Disney animated films, and I'll kind of get into the reasons why that is in a little bit. But yeah, a lot of times when a Disney animated film comes out, I feel compelled to go see it like the opening weekend. And this time, while I would have liked to, I didn't feel like it was a necessity this time. And again, we'll get into all that in a minute. But first things first, was a little disappointed that there wasn't a short in front of the movie. It's one of the things that I've come to really look forward to when I go to a Disney animated film is getting the Disney animated short. Now, Zootopia didn't have one in front of it. But Moana, of course, did later that same year. We haven't had a Disney movie, aside from Zootopia, that didn't have, a Disney animated film rather, that didn't have an animated short in front of it since, I believe, 2011. So that was a little disappointing for me, because again, that is one of the things that I do really look forward to. Disney's really been knocking those shorts out of the park recently, so yeah, it was a little bit of a bummer to not get one of those in front of this movie, especially when you consider the animated short that played the last time Wreck-It Ralph was in theaters. Way back in 2012 when Wreck-It Ralph first hit theaters, one of my favorite shorts of all time was aired in front of it, Paperman. So there was a part of me that was kind of hoping that we would get, the next Paperman before Wreck-It Ralph's sequel, but alas, that was not meant to be. I haven't really looked too much into it, but I don't think there's supposed to be a short in front of Mary Poppins Returns, which is the only other Disney movie I could think of that's coming out in the near future that might have a short in front of it. So I guess we're just not getting one this year, which again is unfortunate, but what can you do? But on to the movie itself. And Ralph Breaks the Internet, I felt was a good movie, but not a great movie. That's just kind of my feelings on it. Just perspective before we get into the guts of talking about the movie and reviewing the movie. I'm just not a sequel guy, and that's partially why I wasn't feeling extra motivated to go see this one. I've always, particularly with Disney, I've never been the biggest proponent of sequels, never been the biggest fan of them. A lot of times it is, see what happens happily ever after, and quite frankly, I'm okay with happily ever after. I don't need to see what's after it. So like with Pixar, for example, with Pixar, the whole sequel thing and the sequel culture has kind of been built into the brand from the very beginning. I mean, the first feature they released was Toy Story. The second feature they released was Toy Story 2. So right from the get-go, sequels have always been a part of Pixar, so I've kind of been more accepting of those, even though I am still a little hesitant and cautious when some of them get announced. At least I'm more kind of accepting of that. With Disney animated features, though, particularly the umbrella of the Disney animated classic, I mean, the first one was Snow White back in 1937. So in the 81 years since the first Disney animated classic, when we're talking about sequels, you could argue that there was a spiritual sequel between Saludos Amigos and Three Caballeros. There was a narrative sequel with Rescuers and Rescuers Down Under. You could argue there's another spiritual sequel between Fantasia and Fantasia 2000. And again, you could argue that there was a spiritual sequel between Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh and Winnie the Pooh. And that's been it. So in the 81 years that they've been doing Disney animated classics, to this point there had only been one narrative sequel ever where they were both under the Disney animated classic umbrella. Obviously we've had a lot of those sequels done by Disney Toon Studios, which I've always felt was kind of removed. I don't know. I guess what I'm trying to say is for me, there was always this sort of mystique to the Disney animated classic umbrella where I always liked that it was one story And that was it. And if you wanted more stuff, then Disney Toon Studio could make some of those, and that was what it was. But I always kind of liked the way that the Disney Animated Classics brand stayed away from the sequel culture that especially we've gotten into as time has gone on. So I was very wary, and I remain kind of wary when they did start to announce sequels, Wreck-It Ralph 2 and Frozen 2. I don't want to see the Disney Animated Classic brand become like DreamWorks or become like some of these other studios, you know, Pixar, I guess you could argue, where it's just, they end up just pumping out sequels and franchises as opposed to coming up with continually unique and new ideas. I know, just a quick aside, a lot of people always ask me if I'm going to review the Disney sequels, you know, Lion King 2, Cinderella 2 and 3, and all those. And the answer is probably one of these days I am going to get around to them. But that being said, I'm also not super looking forward to them just because I don't think a lot of them are very good. So all of this is just a very roundabout way of me saying that going into this movie, I was already sort of hesitant and sort of cautious because it was a sequel, and I still don't know how I feel about those, basically. But anyway, actually talking about the movie itself, and as per usual, here's my warning. We're going to get into plot details, spoilers, all that jazz. So if you haven't seen Ralph Breaks the Internet yet, I would recommend, if you don't want anything spoiled for you, stop this video, go watch the movie, come back when you're done. I promise we will still be here. All right, anyway, finally, on to the movie. I guess let's talk about some positives. First, the things that I liked. I still love the characters. I still love Ralph and Vanellope. They were fun characters the first time we saw them. They're still fun. And it was kind of nice to see that they did alter the characters a little bit. So there's 6 years in between the first movie and this movie, much like there were 6 years in real life. And you can kind of see that those 6 years under the new circumstances have sort of altered these characters a little bit. So it was nice to see, while we still have the familiar characters and while they're, you know, there's still familiar traits, they have changed, and time has changed them and circumstances have changed them. So that was certainly a welcome thing. I also thought it was really, again, the animation as per usual is on point, and the representation of the internet I thought was very cool. It felt very busy. It was very colorful. It was very active. It took this very complex idea of the internet and it kind of made it make sense and made it so that you can kind of digest it within the context of the movie. So yeah, I thought they did a really good job with that. And I mean, look, a lot of the movie was fun and interesting and funny. Kind of a lot of their kind of picking up or picking on internet culture, and you know, a lot of like the references and again some jokes and things like that. A lot of that I did think hit, and I did think was pretty smart and witty, and again took a very kind of complex idea and made it pretty fun for you to watch. I will say it was kind of interesting that they were able to, not as much that they were able to get so many brands, but that they were willing to use so many brands, especially when some of them you could consider somewhat competitors to Disney. I mean, we had Amazon was in it, Google was in it, eBay is in it, eBay is in it kind of prominently. And of course, you know, Disney itself is in it, and particularly the OMG Disney, which I thought was kind of funny that they were sort of plugging their own website. But yeah, I thought it was kind of interesting that they used all those, and it sort of helped make it more, I guess, authentic is the word, where, you know, we are seeing you know, the internet with these brands we understand. Now, that being said, they did kind of make up their own internet hub for kind of a placeholder for YouTube, but part of that I think was for plot convenience, because we needed a way for our main characters to make money and a way to explain kind of how a video can make money. And trust me, with YouTube, that's a very complicated conversation that can't just be simplified, as opposed to this kind of entity that they made. I think it was called Buzz Video, so sort of a blend of BuzzFeed and YouTube, where hearts basically equaled money. So I think that was done partially so that one of the main plot points wasn't YouTube, but also so that you could kind of simplify the plot a little bit and simplify kind of the goal a little bit. And also I thought that the new characters that got introduced were kind of fun and lively as well, and unique. Yes is very cool, and again, it's one of those ones where it's like you have that kind of idea of that character in your head, so I don't know, it fit what I thought to be like this big social media influencer person, so I thought that was cool. Knows More was pretty funny, even though he wasn't in him a lot. Shank, voiced by Gal Gadot, was very cool, and I thought they did a good job with that character. So yeah, I thought that you know, the new characters fit in to this kind of extended universe well, and they were all voiced well, and yeah, again, there wasn't any characters on there that I just really didn't like or kind of gave nothing to me. So why did I think that this was a good and not great movie? The big thing for me is I just felt like there was a lot of opportunities here that were either missed entirely or just not really explored all that much. So little things. I was kind of disappointed that we didn't get to see the video game world as much anymore. I know that obviously we explored it pretty in depth in the first movie, but there were elements that were going on there that I was kind of disappointed that we just sort of abandoned. In particular, Fix-It Felix has to take in all of the kids from Sugar Rush, and it's kind of painted that this is going to be, you know, like a little fun little side plot that we can kind of check back in on every now and again, or that we can use to kind of see what's going on both in the video game world and in the real world. And we really never go back to them. We see them in the beginning. That, I guess, sparks Felix kind of sending Ralph on his adventure, and then that's kind of it. Yeah, it just felt like there were like easy connections that you could have done with that. I mean, one, just the comedy of seeing the kids terrorizing Felix, but also Felix said he was going to cover for Ralph. It would have been fun to kind of see how Felix manages to cover the villain in his game not being there while the arcade is open. And, you know, and all the drama of kind of the days winding down until Sugar Rush is broken down, basically. And I felt like we just lost some of that because we really never kind of saw it. We almost exclusively stayed in the internet world. So, yeah, there were elements there that I thought we could have explored a little bit more that we just sort of left on the table. And as for the internet world itself, there were a lot of I feel like there was more commentary on the internet that they kind of dipped their toes into, but they never went full bore into it. I saw a lot of reviews, and the movie's been getting very positive reviews and very good ratings. And again, I agree. I do think this is a good movie, but I thought that there were some reviews that gave the movie almost too much credit. A lot of them were talking about how, you know, it was kind of like a scathing commentary on technology on our lives and how addicted we are to it. And I mean, I guess while I see some of that, I don't know that that was really the focus of the movie. It certainly wasn't the moral or the major plot point of it. The major plot point, the major moral was between Vanellope and Ralph, between kind of, you know, letting your friends go, not smothering your friends, not kind of keeping people from chasing their dreams for fear of disappointing others. You know, there were those elements I thought were kind of the morals of the movie and the themes of the movie. So the theme of, you know, like this kind of technology addiction, again, while I can see it, I just thought that some people were giving it a little bit too much credit because I don't really think that it kind of explored that as much. And the other element that I thought that they started to kind of explore, but really dropped it surprisingly quickly and kind of unexpectedly, was the idea of the toxicity of people on the internet and comments and things like that. There's a scene where Ralph kind of stumbles into the comment room and he sees all these comments on him in particular, and there's, I mean, if anyone's ever been on YouTube long enough, a lot of negative comments about him. and it affects him because, you know, we saw in the whole last movie, you know, he had this complex where he was the bad guy and he didn't like how people just viewed him as the bad guy. And while we certainly, you know, got past that to a point in that movie, and I'm sure, you know, we've gotten past it in the years since that movie, I was surprised that seeing so much negativity towards him and seeing people still viewing him as the bad guy didn't, like, spark something in Ralph. I mean, he kind of mentions it, and then he very quickly just gets over it, where he's like, oh, well, you know, people always, they thought I was a bad guy for 20 some odd years, so, you know what. So I just thought that was, unusual that they went so far as to kind of approach the subject and bring it up, but not actually kind of go into it and not make it a plot point or a character point in particular for Ralph. He really doesn't affect his character really at all. I mean, he's affected more by Vanellope and potentially losing Vanellope than he is by kind of the outside influence of people, which, I mean, it's good, but it's unusual that it got brought up and not fully explored. And the other thing that I thought was kind of funny, I mean, it kind of is what it is, but I thought that the idea of the insecurity virus was a little ham-fisted, because, you know, the whole identifying insecurity, broadcasting insecurity. I don't know, I just felt that was kind of beat you over the head. There wasn't exactly not much metaphorical about that. It was just explicitly stating it for you. So I thought that was a little bit ham-fisted. Obviously, I get what they were going for, but yeah, I thought just a touch on the nose there for me. But really, I think that the problem that I had for the majority of the movie was I was struggling to find something to really grab onto. I thought the idea was very cool and very unique. Okay, you know, we've done the video game stuff. Let's go explore the internet and see all that. Cool concept. I'm all on board. We get kind of the problem early on. Makes sense. Okay, we need to go get a steering wheel. This is how we're going to go do it. Go. But throughout especially the early adventures of the internet, I just felt like we were struggling to get to kind of the heart of the movie and kind of the meat of the movie. They kept kind of flirting with this idea of Vanellope is unhappy and is looking for something. So that thread is throughout the movie. It's just, I felt like, again, there could have been more that we did with it, or maybe just more fleshed out, more until we started to get towards the third act and we started to kind of look into the relationship between Ralph and Vanellope having to make a decision to stay in the internet, and Ralph having to deal with his jealousy and his insecurities and all that stuff. Until we got to that point, then I thought, okay, the emotion of the movie starting to come in. Now I'm starting to get something I can sink my teeth into. Until then, it just seemed like we were having just sort of wacky adventures, which are fun and good. It just, like I said, compared to a lot of the Disney animated movies that we had been getting leading up to this point, I just felt like I was missing something. And again, I know it sounds like I'm being overly critical and overly negative with this movie. I promise, I did like the movie. I did think it was good. It's just, the Disney animated movies, I do hold to a different standard just in general. And whenever you're critiquing something, I think it sounds more negative than it is. But again, there was a lot to like about this movie. Other things, I thought the racing scene was very cool, very, very cool, well animated. I thought it was cool kind of getting to see these more modern graphics and like modern technology when compared to the 8-bit stuff of the video game. So I thought that was well done. The stuff with the princesses was interesting. I was kind of hit and miss with it. Some of it I thought was meh. Some of it I thought was very funny. The line they had in regard to Merida was one of the best in the movie. I never noticed the thing about the water before that they brought up either. So that was I learned something new that I'm sure I'll be paying attention to. And it was just kind of funny watching them sort of make fun of themselves, make fun of the tropes that Disney themselves have made. So, and that's always entertaining. Also thought that the princesses led into one of the best probably the best musical hit of the whole movie. It's towards the end climax. All the princesses are in kind of doing their own shtick, and every time you get a princess, the score in the background shifts into the score from their movie. So I thought that was a very clever musical thing, and one of the better musical hits throughout. So again, there was a lot to like about this movie, and there's a lot that I did like about this movie. I thought it was a good, solid movie. I just, when compared to even the last two animated Disney classics that we got, Zootopia and Moana, there was so much more said in those movies than I think was said here, particularly Zootopia. Zootopia obviously had a lot of like social commentary to say. It didn't beat you over the head with the social commentary or make it like overtly obvious, but like there was a lot there. I feel like that sort of level of social commentary that Zootopia did, we could have probably seen in this movie because we were dealing with internet and internet culture and all that stuff. And it just wasn't quite there as much. So that's really where my disconnect came in a little bit. But the good news for Disney regardless is that Wreck-It Ralph 2 is doing very good in theaters. Again, it was getting good reviews. Audiences do seem to like it. So that's all positive stuff, because the next time we get a Disney animated classic, it's going to be another sequel. It's going to be Frozen 2. And I don't think it's a stretch to say that Frozen 2 has a lot more riding on it than Ralph Breaks the Internet. Obviously, Frozen was a mega phenomenon. There's a lot of anticipation for this movie. With high anticipation comes high expectations. So hopefully that's a sequel that really can deliver. I know I have my fingers crossed for it because I really loved Frozen. So I'm hoping that Frozen 2 can kind of keep it going. And you know, if it is on the same level as Ralph Breaks the Internet, that's fine too. As I keep trying to point out, I did think it was a good movie, and it wasn't a bad sequel by any stretch of the imagination. The old Disney Toon Studios sequels had a lot worse than this one. This is at least a movie that I can go back to and watch, and it doesn't ruin the original or anything like that. So, yeah. So as long as Frozen 2 isn't, you know, a dumpster fire, which I don't think it will be, even though I am cautious because sequels scare me, it should be okay, hopefully. So yeah, that kind of wraps up my thoughts on Ralph Breaks the Internet. So I'm very curious to hear what you guys have to say, because like I said, it does seem like a lot of people have liked this movie and have been very high on this movie. Maybe you guys saw a lot more in it than I did, and if you did, please tell me below. Or maybe you agreed with me that it was good, just not one of the best that Disney's done in the last decade. And if you did, again, tell me below what your thoughts were on the movie. And before I go, just some general house cleaning stuff. Again, as I mentioned in the front, I know. The Disney Guy review for Oliver & Company, you've been waiting for it for a while. I know. Believe me, I know. It's been very frustrating and I haven't had time to work on it. This past month was absolutely manic for me. Way more work than I even anticipated happening. So, luckily, I do have a bit of a break now, so I'm really gonna try to knuckle down and bang that one out by the time that I leave for home for the holidays. So hopefully in a couple weeks that will be out and ready to go. And the plan would be, in that scenario, that once January hits and the new year hits and 2019 comes, we are full bore into the Renaissance era of Disney, which, as I'm sure you guys know, is my favorite era, and I know it's a lot of yours too, judging by the comments and the emails that I've gotten. So just hang on tight. We're almost there, guys. Hopefully 2019 is nothing but crazy fun Renaissance stuff. And some other things to keep an eye out for. I had floated this idea out a few months ago, and I think that we're going to go through with it. I think that we are going to go through with doing some sort of Let's Play for Kingdom Hearts. It will not be on this channel regardless of what happens. I do think the idea that we're going to go with is I'm going to do the series exclusively on Patreon until it is completely done. When the series is completely done on Patreon, then I'll start to release the videos on some sort of schedule on a different channel from this one. And obviously when that time comes, I'll give all that information there. But I think that that's what we're going to do. I'm in the process of trying to figure out all the stuff that I need to get that done. I believe I'm going to use some of the funding from my very generous patrons on Patreon to get that project started. So look forward to that. Again, that's probably going to be a 2019 project that we'll start to work on. And speaking of the Patreon, I am going to be recording my thoughts on the movie Creed 2, which I also saw recently, and those thoughts will be, again, exclusively on Patreon. So if you want to get some of those exclusive videos, that's the place to check them out. So I'll put the link in the box down below if you want to check out my Patreon and see kind of all the fun extra stuff that you get by being a patron of the channel. Alright, so that's going to wrap it up for me for tonight. I'm going to go get some much needed rest. Like I said, apologies if I look tired. It's been a long few weeks. As always, you can keep up to date with me and everything going on with the channel on my Twitter, twitter.com/JoeTheDisneyGuy. Again, link to that down below, link to my Patreon down below. And again, please let me know what your thoughts are about Ralph Breaks the Internet. Let me know what your thoughts are about the upcoming movies that we have coming from Disney. We have Mary Poppins Returns, which I know I just spent a lot of minutes talking about my fear of sequels, and while I had a lot of fear of the sequel to Mary Poppins, so far it looks pretty good. So I'm actually starting to get excited for that and starting to anticipate that. So what your thoughts are on that. I saw trailers for Dumbo. We'll see. That looked interesting. Kind of looked like Alice in Wonderland meets The Greatest Showman. So I don't know. I guess we'll all kind of see how that goes. Yeah, let me know your thoughts on all those Disney things, and I promise you, the Oliver and Company review is coming. It's coming. It's coming. I promise. Just bear with me. All right, you guys are the best. I will see you guys real soon.